Ricky Pearsall, Florida wide receiver, 6'1", 189 pounds, 9 1/4 inch hands, 30 7/8 inch arms, 73 3/8 inch wingspan. He is 23. He'll be 24 when the season kicks off. 9'9". Yep. Old man Ricky. 4.41 in the 40. He had a 1.57 in the 10-yard split. He had a 20-yard shuttle of a 4.05, 3-cone of 6.64, wow, which those two things are just oddly dissimilar. 129-inch broad jump, 42-inch vertical,
42-inch vertical.
42.
Gross.
70 bench press reps. 70 bench press reps.
Dang.
17.
This guy's amazing.
Bench press reps. This is a guy.
Dude should play defensive end.
Lunch pill guy.
All right. Last year in 12 games, he had 65 receptions, 965 yards receiving, 4 touchdowns, 3 rush attempts, 62 yards, and an additional 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, so Ricky's a name that he's been climbing up boards. You've been hearing a little bit more about him. And it's always fun to watch some of those guys because sometimes you watch guys that are getting hyped a little bit and you're like, I don't see the hype. That's a bummer. And other times you watch a guy and you're like, oh, I get why he's being hyped. This was one on the pleasant side for me. This was one of the ones where I watched the tape and I was like, I get it. I see why he's growing in popularity. I see why people are getting excited about him. He got a 73.98, so just missed, just nipping at the heels of a 74 there, which is a really, really solid score for this guy. I think he's one of the best route runners in this class. Really, really efficient with his movement. I think he's got really solid hands. His releases off the line are very solid overall. He's always in control. It doesn't seem like he's ever, sometimes you watch guys and they make so many movements and so many, but
we'll talk about a guy next show that's like that.
Yes.
Go ahead.
That they're just kind of out of control. He's never that way. He's not a true burner. He doesn't have great speed. It's adequate. I think it's adequate. I think the 4.41 is even maybe a hair faster than I would have expected based on the tape.
I mean, 4.41 is really fast.
That's what I'm saying. I think that was a hair faster than he showed on the field.
I agree with that.
He seemed like he was closer to a 4.5 to me type of play, which is still fine.
Which is still really fast.
But totally fine.
Yeah, I totally understand. I was kind of shocked a little bit by the 4.41.
Yeah, it was a little bit better of a time than I necessarily gave him credit for as a play speed versus a tapes or a timed speed. But he is still a guy that's quick in and out of his breaks. I'd like to see him be a little bit more physical. I think there's times, especially in contested catch situations, where I think he could be a little bit more physical, help him bring down a few more footballs. But overall, I mean, like I said, he's nipping at the heels of a 74. So he's really solid overall. I have him at 9 in this class, which doesn't sound like in most classes you're like, oh, he's your wide receiver 9.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, the first 12, 13 guys are really pretty good players in this class. So
and I'm with you there. I have him, I think, at 13 or something like that, based off my nerd score.
Mm-hmm.
But he's in that group of players I referenced when I was talking about Roman Wilson.
Yeah.
That 9 through 13, those are the guys I got to rewatch and figure out exactly what kind of order. So he could be all the way up at 9 by the time that's all done, and I wouldn't even be a little bit shocked about it. He does a lot of good things. So the one thing that I couldn't figure out, and I had a hard time kind of nailing down, he's really quick, right? I feel like that's one of his strengths. But to me, he's not bursty. Mm-mm. So I couldn't. So some movements look really good and really, really fast in his routes, and there are other things that I think there are movements that he struggles with because he's just not bursty enough to pull them off, and he's not going to get separation on every single route.
Yeah, he's more sudden than he is quick. It is an odd. To be fair, I gave him a 6.5, or I gave him a 6.5 for burst, but a 7.5 for quickness.
So I gave him a 6 for burst and an 8 for quickness.
Okay, so you're even a slightly further spread than me.
It's a little bit of a further spread, and I couldn't quite nail it down. It was an odd watch for me just to see him because I think he's a good route runner. I think he knows what he's doing, but there are times that he's running a route and he's just never going to get separation on that route because his body doesn't move the way he needs it to move to gain separation on a defensive back. So that's just like my minor concern and kind of thought on his speed when you watch him. But other than that, he's a good route runner. I think I got no issues with his hands whatsoever. He's a very reliable hands catcher. There's not a ton there after the catch, but I think there is a little bit there. He'll occasionally create a bit, but he's generally going to get you what's there.
Mm-hmm.
And
I gave him an average score for that.
I feel like he didn't get a chance to like do much after the catch because like he was getting like there's a man on him almost every time.
I agree, and I think that might also be the fact that he doesn't have much of that initial burst. If he catches, if he's not running in stride, he's not a guy that's going to be able to catch a ball and then burst away from defensive back. He just doesn't have that one little element. So
that extra gear,
that defensive back has time to close on it.
Yeah, his yards after the catch was one of my biggest weaknesses for him.
But he's making catches away from his body. He's got good body control. He's got all that kind of stuff that you're looking for. So another guy I can't really see as anything more than a Z or a slot receiver. He's definitely not a number one for a team. But I think he's going to do well enough, and especially if he gets in a good offense, that he'll be able to garner some targets, and he'll be able to be a wide receiver 3 with wide receiver 2 upside. That's kind of how I see him. A lot of these guys in today's show, that's kind of where I see them, and the position I see them as a Z kind of as their top level.
Yeah. So for me, Ricky Pearsall, he's my wide receiver 9 overall, and
same spot.
I agree with a lot of things you guys are talking about there. I thought he also tracked the ball really well.
Mm-hmm.
I thought his hands were fantastic. I thought, and you could tell, being 24, like this is a kid that's really crafted his art, right? Like he's really worked on becoming a really professional wide receiver. I mean, you could tell like he shows light hands a lot too. Yeah. So, and it helps. Yeah. Like he's developed his game. So like the fact that he's able and the things that he's able to develop where like, you're right, Matt, where he's limited with the yards after catch, where he doesn't have that burst. Like he's the kind of player that he's such a good route runner. He's such a good technical wide receiver. Like I said, showing those lay hands, he'll be a PPR factor. I think this is a guy who's going to get second round draft pedigree, and I think he'll be I think with his draft pedigree, I'm kind of putting this all into my eval too. Like I feel like he's good enough. There's enough talk out there as well. Like he's going to probably go in the second round, so he'll have a spot on a roster to show. And I think he's talented enough by if he's given the opportunity, he can be, like you said, almost like week in, week out wide receiver 3, which is still that's a really good player, right? You're a top 36 fantasy receiver for multiple years.
And I think that's a great starting point too.
Yes, and I think he has the opportunity to grow into potentially he's good enough to be a wide receiver too. He's got good enough hands. He's got a really good route ability. He can win on all 3 different levels. Like he can win everywhere on the field. So what I saw on there. And he showed he's got enough speed where, like, if he can get if he gets enough separation, he can burn a defense. So I think he's a really good, solid player, really safe. If you're like in this draft, like he's an older, like poor man's Lad McConkey. Like he's kind of like a poor man's Lad McConkey is how I kind of view him. Like, which is weird because I'm putting two white guys together against each other. That's what he reminded me of. It's like, it's like kind of like a poor Lad McConkey. Like I'd much rather have Lad McConkey by 7 margin, but like I'd be satisfied getting Ricky Pearsall in my draft. Like he's somebody like if I can grab him in the 3rd round of my rookie draft, like the top of the 3rd round, I feel really good about that.
I agree. Yep.
But like I'm not if I get him at like 2, like if somebody drafts him at 2.6, I'm like, ooh, that's a little high. Like there's some running backs out there, but like he's real good value, and I come away excited at 3.1, 3.2, 3.3. If somebody slips like 3.4, like dude, I got Lad McConkey, or say I got Jonathan Brooks, and I got probably going top 8. I got Brock Bowers, Blake Corum, and I got Ricky Pearsall. Like, oh, that's a good draft. You know, like those posts right after the NFL draft, you feel really good about it. And 3 years down the road, they're all one of those guys is cut.
Yeah, everybody you like compliment like, oh, good haul, and then like years later,
you're like, should I bring on my taxi squad?
Did you see all the names I posted on Twitter the other day?
Oh yeah, you just posted a bunch of names with no context at all.
Just names.
Did you?
Yeah,
that's classic.
So I like the player. I mean, I think being wide receiver 9 in this class says a lot. So he'd be much higher in other classes. Like obviously his age is working against him.
Right.
Besides that, for a dynasty prospect, this is definitely a guy you throw on your roster for the next 4 to 6 years and have a viable person. Like immediately, like, oh, this guy's my wide receiver 4. Like same thing. Like you trade away all your draft picks because you're a championship caliber team. You get Ricky Pearsall, you're like, oh, I have somebody I can throw on my roster and feel comfortable with her. I have some depth now.
Yeah, you've bolstered your depth for sure.
I think an NFL team is going to be able to like take him in the 3rd round and feel good about that guy's going to be able to come in right away and probably produce for us or be a slot receiver or something. So
Ricky Pearsall, exciting.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I echo what you guys said. And I think he's. Let me see. For me, he's right now like number 10 as far as like tape score goes. So he's my top 10.
So we're all in the same range then.
Yep,
for sure.